New construction is obviously a favorite amongst buyers, but there's some key mistakes I want you to avoid as you make your way here to Houston. Hi, I'm Carolyn Bauerschlag, a local realtor right here in West Houston, helping people just like you relocate from all over the country right to our great city. The first big mistake that I see people make when buying new construction is not reading the contract. And I get it. It's 75, 80, 90 pages long. It's overwhelming. But what I want you to know as a consumer is that those new construction contracts are written by the builder. And here in Texas, that's allowable, right? If the builder is party to the contract and so are you, the builder is allowed to present their own contract to you and fill it out however they want. And wouldn't you know it, all of the provisions that are written in that contract are in favor of the builder, right? So what you're going to see is that there are typically only really exit clauses for you as it pertains to your ability to obtain financing. But even then, it's extremely narrow. So they'll ask for you to deposit earnest money, and that's usually $10,000, $20,000 on the low end, and it could be up to 10% on the high end. And what these contracts say is, I'm kind of going to keep your earnest money no matter what. The one asterisk that you have is if you are unable to obtain financing on the loan. But that comes with even more asterisks. What it's going to say is that you have to get pre-approved maybe within 2 to 3 weeks with their own lender, and only if their own lender denies your loan can you terminate that contract and get your earnest money back. So what I want every buyer to be extremely aware of when they write a new construction contract is that when you send that earnest money, basically assume that unless you get denied for a loan within 2 weeks, whether it's you buying it a month from now or 6 months from now, they're going to keep your earnest money if you don't buy that house. Other important things for you to know about the builder contract is it's going to say things like you're not able to be contingent upon the sale of a property. Now, people don't really understand that because they say, well, of course I'm moving from one place and I need to get to another, so surely I can make the purchase of my new construction home contingent upon the one that I'm selling. And the answer to that is absolutely not. That builder, once they get done with that house, is they want to play hot potato with it and get it off their books just as quickly as possible. So if they have to wait on you to get you to sell your home, you can rest assured that that's going to cost you money. So you might see that in the form of them requiring additional earnest money deposits, or them saying that they retain the right to terminate the contract and sell your beautiful home that you've been building to somebody else. Another very important thing to know about this contract is it will say all over it that they are not required to give you any financial help if for some reason this home does not appraise. So a common mistake that people make whenever they're purchasing a property is they might get a little excited and overimprove. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. But if that home doesn't appraise by a third-party appraisal management company, that builder kind of doesn't care. They say you knew this was a risk whenever you bought, and they're going to expect you to pay. There's some other goofy little provisions that you'll see in these contracts that say things like the builder retains the right to take up to 2 years to build your home. They'll say things like, if you interfere on our job site too frequently, we can terminate your contract. The craziest one that I saw said something like, we're not subject to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And my question was like, why is that in there, right? Like that's a ridiculous thing to say to somebody. My point is that these builders are really just writing their own contracts to protect their own interests. So it's really important that you make sure to read what you are signing. The next mistake that buyers make when they're purchasing a home is not really understand what type of building materials the builder is using during construction. Now, on the inconsequential side of things, what I mean is that builders are in the last couple of years doing more and more to strip all the good stuff out of the home. So this might be things like you used to get beautiful sconces over your sinks in a bathroom. Now it's just a canned light. They used to frame the mirrors around any bathroom to prevent those little green marks with the water when a sink gets splashed too many times. Now they're just a piece of glass up on the wall. They used to maybe do frameless glass in the master shower, and now it's just going to be kind of your run-of-the-mill, something that you would expect to see in an apartment. It's kind of inconsequential, but it also doesn't make a property look as beautiful as it might. Right? So that's something to be aware of. I've seen things like 2-inch baseboards where 5 inches used to be standard. I've seen builders say, we don't put crown molding in houses anymore because it's not as modern. But really I'm thinking it's just less money for the builder to have to pay to make a home look pretty. All of those little things that when you walk into a home and you think, wow, this is so beautiful and I love how new and lovely it is, we've seen kind of clawed back over the last couple of years. So I would file that more under the too bad, so sad, inconsequential. But what I find to be more irresponsible with new construction is that they're really using poorer quality construction materials in the structural and mechanical components of your home. Now, what I mean by that is chief among them is going to be the roof. Your roof should have an architectural shingle on it here in Houston, Texas. Architectural shingle, if you imagine like thick sheets of paper being stacked up on top of each other, that's what you need in order for hail to not damage the underlayment of your roof, or for water intrusion not to really become a thing, or the sun beating down on this roof not degrading the asphalt too quickly. But what we're seeing a lot of is 3-tab shingles, and you wouldn't know to look for this, right? And 3-tab shingles kind of honestly shouldn't be made. What a 3-tab shingle is kind of like paper end to end, right? So you have one layer of protection between you, the sun, the elements, hail, all of it, and it degrades really quickly, right? So my expectation when a home is new is that it's going to have materials that are going to last you 15, 20 years. But if they're using something like a 3-tab shingle, that really is only going to last you 7 to 8 years. Small narrative, when we drove through some communities after Hurricane Beryl in 2024, no one's roof was really damaged. Like, there might have been a loose shingle here or there, but Beryl was kind of an unfortunate event here on the west side of Houston, in that we lost a lot of power, but it wasn't a super damaging event on the west side. What was interesting is driving through neighborhoods and seeing where what we thought is rather inconsequential, there were neighborhoods where the roof material had been uniformly awful on these builds that were only 6, 7, 8 years old. And so you saw blue tarps on people's roof like every 4th or 5th house. And that's crazy, right? And upon further inspection, wouldn't you know it, it was a 3-tab shingle. So yours truly is always going to be watching out on the building material that these guys are using so that you're going to be okay. Another sort of category of irresponsibility that we're seeing with builders is stripping out things like brick on all 4 sides of a home. They're removing better quality insulation from your attic. They're removing gutters from the perimeter of the home. And they'll say things like, well, according to our engineers, this is all within the realm of our standards and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like, yeah, but you need gutters, right? So you as a buyer may not look for gutters on your property, but you're gonna want them, right? And so instead of you having to put these on post-market for like $1,800 or $2,200, I want to make sure that the builder is taking the time to do what they should be doing and delivering you a great piece of property. As I've walked through more and more homes in the last 2 or 3 years, what I've personally noticed is that perhaps the care that we are used to seeing and the quality of construction of a home is falling by the wayside. So you might look at to where 2 pieces of drywall meet in the corner of a room and it's like wiggly, and you think, why? It's because someone rushed too quickly in and out of floating the drywall tape. Well, that should be correct, right? Or you might look at a wall and say, is that kind of sloping the wrong way? And if the answer is yes, like get out of level and make sure that that wall is square, right? These builders will say to you, well, the costs are high because we've had to bonus people to come out here and, be incentivized to complete construction on a home. But what I think is really happening is that may be true, but they're not really inspecting or following up on the work that's being done. And I think a lot of this, unfortunately, is in the name of builders maintaining a certain profit. So for any buyer that's buying new construction, I want you to be acutely aware of how that builder is approaching both the construction and the repairs along the way of how that home is made. Another big mistake that I see buyers making whenever they're purchasing a new construction home is not considering the total purchase price. Now, this seems kind of obvious, like, of course you're going to consider the purchase price when you're buying a home, but what I mean by that is that just because everything else around you is very expensive doesn't mean that your very expensive choice is also a good one, right? So when you're purchasing a home, what you need to be aware of is not just the neighborhood in which you're buying, but kind of like what the buyer willingness to pay is in and around the immediate area that you're buying, right? So if what you're purchasing, new construction, is on the south side of Katy and they say, well, there's no new construction really happening down here anymore. Well, that's true because the south side of Katy is mostly built out. But if you're buying a 2,600 square foot home from Tri-Point, let's say, for $725,000, the question that I want you to ask yourself is 3 or 5 years from now, if someone needs to sell that home, are they going to be able to come anywhere close to $725,000? Or did you as the buyer just unfortunately take it on the chin because you agreed to this builder saying this is a rarity? Right? So when you buy a home, you have to be so aware of what potentially a next buyer is going to be willing to pay in a 3 to 5 year period. Now, this is obviously hard to approximate. We don't know what the economic climate's going to be in 3 to 5 years. But what I can tell you, and what we tell every buyer when we start this process, is that Houston is a moderate growth market. You can expect Houston to appreciate somewhere between 3 to 5% in any given year. Now, even in bad years, I would say we're pretty insulated. 2025 is kind of a correction year, I would say, across the country. And we as Houston right now are seeing basically a statistically flat movement on our average prices month to month, right? So we're not really seeing a huge retraction in our value, but you're probably not going to grow that much in any given year either. So if you're already overpaying, let's say by 10 or 15%, if you had to sell in a couple years, you may be underwater on that house. Another really big mistake that we see buyers make when they're purchasing new construction is falling for an interest rate gimmick. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with the point that I just made previously. Builders are very invested in making sure that they get the purchase price that they want. And they're also very smart. They're in the business of selling homes. And what they know is that a lot of buyers are extremely payment sensitive. So what these builders will do is they'll say, hey, if you buy this house at this price from us, we will make sure that your interest rate is lower, hopefully for 30 years, but oftentimes it's only lower for 1 or 2 years. It's called an interest rate buy down. So essentially what these builders are going to do is they're going to go to a lender and they say, hey, on behalf of the buyer, I'll pay upfront the interest for maybe 1 or 2 years. And what they're trying to do is just grease the wheels to get you into the door. They know that your payment's going to be okay for 1 or 2 years. And what's it to them if it's not in year 3, 4, and 5, right? So what we've seen, and the chickens are kind of coming home to roost on this right now, is in 2022, 2023, 2024, we saw a lot of builders offer these interest rate buy downs in new construction communities. And if buyers were already maxed out on their debt to income ratios, like with that buy down, their payment is as high as it can go because this interest rate's been purchased down. In year 3, in year 4, suddenly their interest payments have gone up and maybe their taxes have gone up, maybe their insurance has gone up, and suddenly their monthly payment is unaffordable. And wouldn't you know it, when we go and we look at these rather young communities and we say, why are all these homes listed that were built in 21, 22, 23, 24? My strong suspicion is that people are potentially underwater on their monthly payments and can't afford them. Right? So when you're buying new construction and you hear that there is an interest rate incentive, what I want you to be very aware of is that the buyer or the builder is extraordinarily interested in making sure that they get their purchase price. They don't really care what happens once you get in the home. So when we're looking at whether or not this is a good choice for you, I want not only your monthly payment to be okay, but I want you to be able to sell and not be underwater if you had to sell within a 5-year period. I met with a seller a couple of months ago who purchased a home in 2022. We didn't help him with that side, but they purchased a home in 2022 from the builder, and the builder did offer them a favorable interest rate. They purchased this home at about $315,000, and by the time I had met them at the beginning of 2025, so only really 2.5 years later, this home was worth about $290,000, right? So the market didn't care that the buyer got a great interest rate. The market's looking at how many homes are on the market and what is a buyer willing to pay today. So we did end up selling that home, but in order to do so, we had to sell it for about $30,000 less than what the buyer paid only a couple years prior. So yes, it's important for you to make sure that your monthly payment is in a good shape, but you also really have to put the shoe on the other foot and say, if I had to get out of this house because my life circumstances changed, will I be underwater? And that's what I help you figure out. Another big mistake that we see people make is not really understanding what matters on resale whenever they're buying a new construction home. And what I mean by that is that not all lots are created equal. Not all attributes in a home are as attractive as others. And so we as your real estate agent are going to help you understand what the conditions are in the particular neighborhood that you're buying in that are more attractive or less attractive than other attributes. So these might be things like, hey, how close is that lot to potentially like a sewage treatment plant? And oh, well, do you see how this lot backs up right here to this really nice green belt? That green belt might be commercial property. It might be earmarked for something commercial 4 or 5 years from now. Or if you see a lot of high tension power lines in the background, how far in the background are they? If they back right up onto your lot, they may not bother you, but they are highly likely to bother the next buyer that comes through. Another thing to think about is like, how do people live in the home in the particular area that you're in? What I mean by that is if you are inside 610, inside the loop, downtown-ish, it's very common to see 3-story townhomes where the primary bedroom's on the 3rd floor. That's all over every single townhome that you see inside 610. But if you come out to the suburbs and you think to yourself, oh, this won't matter. My primary bedroom's on the 2nd floor. That's closer than the 3rd floor. No big deal. What you may come to find is that during the resale process, you're in the minority out here in the burbs, and not everyone likes the primary bedroom up on the 2nd floor. So little things like that that don't make sense logically are nuanced, and your friendly neighborhood realtor will help make sure that if you are buying something that you are considering, what this will look like for you when you resell a property. Another huge mistake that I see buyers make whenever they're purchasing new construction is becoming susceptible to sales agents' tactics. What I mean by that is a sales agent is oftentimes incentivized on the number of contracts that they write in a given period, and they're maybe not incentivized the way that you think that they might be for the home to get to the closing table. So oftentimes we see very high-pressured sales tactics in a new construction community where they will try to put your bottom in a chair and say, what will it take to get you to write a contract today? And that's really not in your best financial interest long term. As we mentioned previously, once you hand over that earnest money, that builder has their clause in it, and they will do almost anything to make sure that that's not refundable to you. So before you fall, I don't want to say prey to, but before you get lulled into a sense of security and excitement with a new construction purchase, I want to make sure that your financing is completely straightened out. I recently had a buyer go to a sales community, and I said to them, hey, go around and look at these new construction homes, knock yourself out, have a great time, but whatever you do not write a contract, and make sure to give them my card. I also let them know that they were going to try to get these people to start a loan application, and I said, please don't get pre-approved with their lender when you're in the early shopping phase. And sure enough, this sales consultant came through and told the buyer, you're in a zip code that's subject to USDA loans. You're eligible for 0% down and 0 financing. And they try to say all these flashy things. The sales consultant is not a lender. The sales consultant has no idea what your personal finances are, and you may not be eligible. And in fact, you're probably not eligible for these 0% flashy kind of loans. So getting your lending straightened out early before you write a contract with a builder is extremely important. Another really big mistake that we see people make in new construction is over-improving at the design center. And why wouldn't you, right? This is the fun part. You've put down your earnest money, you've gotten pre-approved, you're so excited to build your dream home, and they say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here's your chance to do whatever you want in your home. And wouldn't you know it, you go through that design center and things are kind of on a 25 to 30% markup. But you're thinking in your head, I'm building my dream home. Obviously, this makes sense, right? But what you can see very quickly is that a 20 to 30% markup on every little thing turns out to be quite bad for you, especially when you're in a dream home mentality. And what these builders do is they say, hey, whatever you do at the design center, we're actually going to require another cash deposit from you. And it could be 25% and it could be 50%. So if you go to the design center and put in $80,000 in the home, they could say, great, cut me a check today for $20,000 or $40,000. Now, the kind of dirty side of that is that your home still has to appraise. If you are financing this property, that appraisal is going to happen about 2 or 3 weeks before you close, which is several months after you visited the design center, right? So here comes an appraiser and he's like, well, this home's pretty, but all of these over here sold for $600,000 and your cost basis is $700,000. If they turn around and they say, well, all of these upgrades that you did are nice, but the house is still only worth $650,000, you're still on the hook for an additional $50,000 to get the buyer or the builder whole at $700,000. That contract is very explicit that says we don't care if there's an appraisal shortage, we want our money. So in an effort to make sure that you avoid a $50,000 appraisal shortage issue, we spend a lot of time with our clients, and oftentimes I attend these design center appointments to make sure that you're putting your money in responsible places, or at least in the places that we know that you're going to see a return. The last major mistake that I see buyers make is choosing to forego an inspection on a property. And this sounds kind of crazy to me, but if I put myself in the shoes of a buyer, I understand it. Your assumption is that a builder is in the business of making homes beautifully, perfectly, that everything's going to go great. And why should you need an inspection? The house is brand new. But from my perspective, from experience, even the best intentions don't always pan out the way that they should during the building process. So if you imagine a builder hires maybe 15 different subcontractors to come out and do all of these inputs for your slab, your drywall, your paint, your tile, your cabinets, your granite, your whatever, all of these different pieces that go in, your plumbing, your electrical, your windows. There's maybe 100 different hands that touch this home. And while there are processes and checks and balances in place, and yes, there's city inspections, and yes, they need permits and all of these things, there's human error all over this process. So what we encourage buyers to do is to, at a minimum, do a final inspection on their home. But if you're building from dirt, you have the opportunity to do what we call a 3-phase inspection. So you can hire an inspector to look at the home at the slab phase. They make sure all of the plumbing components, that all of the slab is square, all of the plumbing components that come through the slab are in excellent shape, that there's not trash or debris that's being dumped into your slab on accident. You also have the opportunity to inspect at what we call pre-drywall. So the whole house has been framed, the roof is up, they've dropped the electrical, they've dropped the plumbing into the walls, and right before they cover it up, you have a unique opportunity to have an inspector go through and make sure all of those couplings, connections, wiring, insulation, all of it is exactly the way that it should be. And why wouldn't you? It's only a couple $100s on your several $100,000 home, right? And of course, there's a final inspection, which is once all the appliances are installed and it looks like a true house, you have the opportunity to go through and have that inspected one more time. There's a couple of funny stories that we all have as real estate agents, but one that really stands out to me is a friend of a friend told me that their sibling bought a house and they figured everything was fine and they didn't do any kind of inspection. And as it turned out, the day after they moved in the home, they turned on the bathtub and the bathtub flooded all kinds of water into the primary bedroom because somebody did not connect the bathtub faucet properly to the drain. So this is not what you want. Get your home inspected. The builder is 100% responsible for making that home perfectly up to code before you buy. And of course, the best way to avoid all of these common pitfalls is to hire your friendly neighborhood realtor who knows exactly how to navigate this process. If you're moving to the West Houston area, I would love to be a resource for you. And if you found value in the video here today, make sure to click the link below and subscribe. We put content like this out every single week. See you soon.